Good evening, everyone. It is an honor to welcome you all to the 2019 Girls for Science Women in History event. My name is Sanim Rivers, and I'm the Director of Communications for Government and Public Affairs at Horizon Pharma. I also have the honor of serving as a new board member of the Girls for Science board, and I look forward to working with Jackie and my other colleagues to continue the success of an organization that has done so much for young women here in Chicago who are interested in the sciences. At Horizon, we believe that providing exposure and access to STEM programs is fundamental for developing the next generation of innovators, which is why we proudly support organizations such as Girls for Science that are dedicated to exposing young girls to science, technology, engineering, and math, as well as professionals in the space. In addition to developing programs for hard skills, Girls for Science also helps young women to enhance their self-esteem and build relationships that serve to empower them to overcome barriers that may prevent them from achieving greater success in STEM careers.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Alan Brazil. I'm the chairman of the board of Girls for Science. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. It's my great and good pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight, Eileen Gordon. Eileen is a retired chairman, president, and CEO of Ingredion Incorporated, a Fortune 500 company with 11,000 employees and net sales of $5.8 billion for 2017. Eileen is also a member of the board of directors of Lockheed Martin and International Paper. Eileen holds a Bachelor of Science degree in mathematics from MIT and a Master of Science degree in management from MIT Sloan School of Management. Eileen was listed one of Fortune's most powerful women for 5 consecutive years on the US list and for 2 years on the global list. Let's give a big hand to Eileen Gordon.
Well, thank you, Alan, for those kind words, and very happy to be here. And to frame the issue, I mean, why are we here? And I would hope that at the end of this panel, you'll get our theme, which is it's all about STEM education and how it enables all of us here to be successful in our careers. So to frame the issue, I want to quote some statistics. And I was looking this up last night in some old speeches and some Googling different articles. So it's interesting that close to 60% of college attendees are women, but only 30% of STEM degrees go to females. So this is where it starts to split apart. Now, although women comprise nearly half of today's employees, only about a quarter of STEM workers are women. So not enough STEM degrees, so therefore not enough women in those jobs. And according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, wages for STEM positions are 1.7 times that of non-STEM positions. So they pay more. So there's another reason why you want a STEM degree. And it's also predicted that the majority of jobs in the next 10 years, in the next decade, will require technical skills. So it's another reason to get a STEM degree. So we're here to discuss from 3 experienced panelists how a STEM background really helped them be successful in their career. So this is a new role for me because normally I'm one of the panelists, so I'm having a lot of fun. I get to ask all the questions. But I'm going to introduce the panel, and then I'm going to turn it over to them. So first of all, Carrie Steele, who is president of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, and I also call her commissioner, and we'll talk about that. She's a chemist, an environmentalist, and a community leader. And she earned a pre-med degree in chemistry from Xavier University of Louisiana, so a STEM degree. And she has more than 11 years of experience as working as a chemist, and she's worked at both the Jarden Water Purification Plant as a water chemist and the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago as a water sampler and lab technician. And President Steele, she was elected November 6, 2012, to her first term as a commissioner of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, and then she was reelected in 2018 for a second term. And what I love is that she's the only chemist serving on the 9-member Board of Commissioners. So in January 2019, she has a unique qualification leading her, which led her to becoming the first African-American female president in the 130-year history of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. And her chemist background is really what prepared her, so we'll hear more about this. So very excited to hear from you.
Thank you.
Okay, Number 2, I have Patricia Saldana Natke. How'd I do on
That's
that? Okay,
great.
very
Good.
good. I wanted to do that right. Who's president and design principal of Urban Works Limited. And Patricia was named one of 5 emerging designers by Crane Chicago. And she's the founding partner, president, and design principal at Urban Works Limited, which is now in its 25th year. And so she has a passion for cities and neighborhoods, and especially the most vulnerable sections of cities and their populations. And she earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Architectural Studies from the University of Illinois at the Urbana-Champaign campus. So again, continuing the theme with an architectural background. And then finally, I want to introduce Suzette. And Suzette Jeskawiak is Divisional Vice President at one of my favorite places of Pharmacy, Healthcare, and Customer Engagement Technology at Walgreens. So she strategically left Deerfield knowing that with all the traffic at 3 o'clock this afternoon, very smart, because you got to plan for these things.
Exactly.
She leads the pharmacy store and call center technology for Walgreens, and she created and sponsored Walgreens' diverse IT organization and gets girls involved in STEM through organizations like Girls for Science, Girls Who Code, and Lumity. And with more than 25 years of experience across application development, infrastructure, and operations, she has a broad spectrum of experience in consulting technology and the creation and management of lines of business. She holds a BS degree in computer science and mathematics from Santa Clara University and a Master's of Science in Mathematics from the University of Illinois at the Champaign-Urbana campus. So again, another STEM background. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to turn it over to our panel, and I have a couple questions that I've collected, and we're going to turn it over to the audience, so be thinking of your questions. But I first want to ask the panel to expand on your background for a couple of minutes with a focus on your STEM background. I gave an introduction, but I know there's so much more to your career and how you got to be where you are today. So let's start with Carrie.
Thank you. Well, first, hello, everyone, and thanks for having me this evening. How did I get where I am today? So I never would have expected to 10 years ago, well, no, not 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, to say that I was going to be an elected official. But when I was your age, a young girl, I always loved science. I was always mixing things in the kitchen or in the bathroom, but I didn't really have anyone to direct me and tell me that that really was science, because we know science is everywhere. So even when I was mixing things, I was really making health body products or hair products. So I was always great at science, made good grades in it, so that's what I majored in college. It was really as simple as that. I didn't really overthink it too much. But once I got to college, I picked science because I loved it and I got good grades in that subject, but I started looking at what I could do with that career. And that's when I realized there were so many options available to someone who had that basic science foundation. So originally, my summer job was at water reclamation. I worked there every summer while I was getting my chemistry degree. That's how I was introduced into this profession. Did not think I was ever going back there. I graduated from college, and I actually wanted to be a chemist for an oil company because they had awesome salaries. But that's when it really, that's how it went. But then once I interviewed a couple of places because of my water background, that's when, of course, we realized, you ladies know oil and water don't mix, right? So no one would hire me, which sent me right back to water. And that's when I really became an environmentalist. I started really maturing and looking into that career. So my first job, real job, was actually a water chemist for the water department. I worked at the treatment facility, treating our drinking water. From there, I got bored with water, and I moved on to L'Oreal. I formulated hair care products, going back to something I enjoyed when I was younger. And then that's when I really got involved in my community even more and decided to run for office, just basically realizing there was a void at water reclamation. And it was a combination of my experiences before that led me to be able to run for office, and that's my STEM background.
Great, thank you. Great, exciting. Patricia, tell us a little bit about your STEM background.
So I was born and raised in Chicago on the South Side, back of the Yards. And the reason I became an architect was that we would head downtown and I would see these glorious high-rises and these lush landscapes, and this cultural center was the main library back then. And then I went back to my neighborhood and always wondered, why doesn't my neighborhood look like this? And when you're young, you know those things, like why don't I have this great library? And it was at a little simple storefront. Little did I know that as I went into high school and I loved math and calculus, and my favorite subject was physics, doing the all the physics experiments and working with the teachers and the kind of experiments that you were doing here and showing here. I just loved doing that. And so I realized that what I wanted to do was be an architect. I wanted to build buildings because I felt that, good design should be for everyone, and that, in the more underserved neighborhoods, it's even more so where good design is needed to kind of uplift people and, do things that's going to change lives. So, with the statistics that were just mentioned, in architecture school, it's 50-50. So it's 50% female, 50% male. But unfortunately, only 21% are licensed architects. So we actually lose women right out of school for the first 5 years, and we're still trying to figure that out. So I am the American Institute of Architects chair of the Equity Committee here in Chicago, and I was also the chair of the National Committee of the American Institute of Architects, as we're trying to figure all this out. But so that led me to wanting to go to school, and I went downstate Champaign and studied architecture. And when I was 28 years old, I was working at a wonderful woman-owned architecture firm here in Chicago, and I decided to open up my own office. And that's when people were just like, "You're too young, what are you doing?" So never let anyone, say no to you and discourage you, because you have to follow your dreams. And right now I have an architecture firm of 20 people, architects. And we have rehabbed the Buckingham Fountain. That's probably one you would know. We did the restoration of Buckingham Fountain. We've done schools, libraries, and I just became FAIA, Fellow of the AA, which is only like the 3% of architects get to be chosen. There's still way too few women in architecture, and way too few opportunities, but we're making some strides. But I'm really happy to be here, and I'm especially happy because my youngest daughter went through the Girls for Science program, so that's how I met Jackie, and I thought it was just such a wonderful program. It really changed her life, and I know it'll change these girls' lives too. Thank you.
Will you share with us how your background and how STEM has been important?
I was the fourth daughter in my family, and I think at that point, my parents gave up trying to get a son. And so my dad pretty much treated me like a boy, or maybe I just didn't know the difference between boys and girls, whatever. I can change oil in a car, I can, do all kinds of supposedly boy things, right? So I just didn't know that, girls didn't do certain things, because I did all of them. It seemed fine. So I, in high school, loved mathematics. Who loves math? Come on, don't be shy. I think math gets such a bad rap. So I loved mathematics and science in general, right? But definitely math. And I was planning to be a teacher. And I was a really good student when I was in high school and college, frankly. I was valedictorian in high school, and I didn't understand the kids that didn't care about school. So I knew I couldn't teach high school because I would not relate to any of those kids. So I thought, okay, well, I love teaching people. I'll teach college. Things will be better. So I went to get my PhD in mathematics at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. And along the way, I learned that actually most college professors mostly do research and then kind of on the side teach. I was like, that is not for me. So I also have a degree, a bachelor's degree in computer science, and so I thought, okay, I'll try that. So coming out of, with the shameful leaving the U of I with a master's degree in mathematics, which was like frowned upon, I went into consulting from a computer science perspective. And I did development for a number of years and eventually moved into management. And then I've spent, a portion of my career in industry working for companies and a portion of my career doing consulting, and have, just grown through my career over time up the ranks of management. And now, run all of the technology and all the stores at Walgreens. So we have about 10,000 stores. Who's been to Walgreens?
One.
Yay! Shop at Walgreens. Yeah, and all their call centers. So I wouldn't have, expected necessarily to be in this very senior role, responsible for 24-hour Walgreens, making sure that our customers can always do whatever they need to do. But I am, and it's fantastic. So I encourage everyone to go for it.
Great. So now we're going to mix it up a little, and I have a number of questions. As I said, I'll then turn to the audience. But I guess one of my questions to the panel, and we can go in any order, whatever you want to respond to, but I'm looking for an example where your STEM background helped you be successful to attain an opportunity. Maybe it was a promotion, a new job, but without a STEM background, you might not have been appropriate for that. So is there anyone here who wants to talk about that?
Sure. Yours is easier.
I'll jump in. It was simple for me when I ran for office. No one on the board had a science background. So in addition to me being concerned about the issues going into my community and wanting to represent my community, the fact that I had that chemistry background just gave me that extra nudge above all the other candidates. So I feel that's what actually opened the door for me as far as politics.
Great.
Yeah, and I think for myself, I feel that my architecture background helps me very often throughout the years. About 80% of the projects we take on have a community engagement component, which simply means that we present to the community and we listen to their voices in order to make things happen. So, for example, in Pilsen, I was asked to work on a master plan, and I was just always really proud of the fact that I could speak Spanish, bilingual. I'm an architect. I could interpret their voices. So just being an architect and a female architect and a Latina female architect, I mean, the percentages get really, really tiny. We laughed because it's actually 0.7% of architects are Latina architects. So we could probably all fit in one small room. And so for me, the fact that my STEM background of architecture, which is really math, science, and art put together, helps me through 80% of the kind of work we do to be able to represent people and really translate their dreams into physical spaces.
Great, thank you. And Patricia, I think STEM has been helpful for you with your IT background?
Yes.
Well, not Patricia, I mean
sorry,
Suzette. Sorry.
So, certainly I was able to do application development because I had a bachelor's in computer science. But I would say that science in general, any science and math, definitely helped me in my consulting career, more so than folks that didn't have that background. And I would say it's the analytical thinking and really the scientific method, right, of thinking through a problem and being able to break that problem down. I used to think everybody could do that, right? I'm like, oh, I can do that, everyone can do that. Actually, everyone cannot do that. So the fact that you can take a bigger problem and make it into smaller problems is actually a pretty unique skill. And so that's partially was taught to me through science, right? And so for the girls who had your science projects up there and you had, your different steps of how to, first think about the problem and then go look at what's already been solved and, right? That notion of how do you break a big problem down really helps me, actually throughout my entire career, but certainly in being chosen for very large programs with very complex problems.
Great. Now, my next questions are all about mentors and sponsors, and everybody hears a lot about that and the importance of having a mentor. So I had many mentors in my life. So does anybody want to talk about a mentor in their life that really made a difference? Because now we have role models that are women, maybe men. So Suzette, is there anybody in your life
Yeah, so I would say,
besides your father?
right, and my mother, who was is a very strong woman, still alive. So I think, one of the things for me is to find mentors everywhere, and they don't even need to know that they're your mentor. So if you have curiosity and you observe people and you look at, oh, that works really well, or oh, that doesn't work so well, you can learn a variety of things from folks. And so I think, curiosity is definitely very important. But in terms of actual mentors, most recently our CIO has just been a phenomenal mentor for me in terms of improving my senior leadership capability. As you move through your career, people talk about, moving from an individual contributor to a manager, which is definitely a big difference. But as you move from a manager to a senior manager to an executive, what you do as a senior manager is very different from what you do as an executive. And he really helped me through that transition. So,
And did it matter that he wasn't a woman?
no, I would say, just for everyone, I have had very few female mentors.
Yeah.
Very few, because there aren't very many of us. I am the highest ranking technology professional at Walgreens, right? As a woman,
Yeah.
I'm not the highest
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
I'm the highest female, right?
And what about the cultural piece within Walgreens? You have Europeans and Americans. Does that create conflict, or does that change how you create value?
Yeah, so we merged, I don't know, about 6 years ago now, with Boots Alliance. Boots is like the Walgreens of the UK and into Europe quite a bit, actually. And so we merged companies, and a lot of our senior leadership has come from there. And it is definitely a different culture. And so really, paying attention to what that is and learning what's important to those people versus, what was important to Walgreens has been, a good journey.
Now, Patricia, you've had your own firm, so are there mentors in your field that you can access?
Yes, and actually, looking back, because I recall the discussion on this question, and it is about those silent mentors. It was looking at the women in Chicago who own their own architecture firms, and the woman that I worked for, Carol Ross Barney. You may know her name. She's the one who just did the entire Riverwalk redevelopment. She's called the Daniel Burnham of the city. It's wonderful that someone's being referred to as Daniel Burnham, and it's a female, so I think that's great. But I worked at her office, and it was a silent mentorship. I never approached her and said, can you mentor me or anything formal? But I was lucky enough to sit in an open office right outside of her office, which did not have walls, so I could hear negotiating contracts and talking about projects and designing. And so I think you have to make sure that you use whatever opportunities you have to learn as much as possible and absorb as much as possible. Now there are formal mentoring programs. The American Institute of Architects now has what's called a bridge program. So they take a senior architect with someone younger, and there are formal meetings, there are events. That works amazingly well also. So it's a little bit of both. I did want to mention on the sponsoring and advocating, I think that's where I feel I can do the most. Whenever someone asks me who can go and do a design jury, I always ask some of my younger staff to kind of get them it's real, these ladders of mobility to move as quickly as possible. So it goes both ways. I'm fortunate that now I'm able to recommend others. But for me, the mentorship was really that quiet mentorship. It's just kind of making sure that I knew who everyone was. And I know that they were advocating for me also, because starting up a firm is a bit of a challenge. And there were a lot of people looking out for me to make sure that I succeeded. So that was important.
And Carrie, were there people that helped you in this field that were leaders or mentors?
Definitely. Well, first, anytime I get this question, I have to acknowledge my parents, because that's where I just received my work ethic from. And they just made me believe that school was very important, and whatever education I had, that was going to be my foundation to be successful. But as I started working in every career, my story is very close to both of yours. There's not many men in our field, and definitely now there are more females in the field, but before there weren't many females. So, I said not many men. There were
Females.
You know what I mean. So there are more men in our field and not many females. So usually, I was fortunate enough. Every laboratory that I worked in, there was usually one other female there, and they guided me and helped me and gave me advice. So one thing that kind of killed the myth of, sometimes people say it's hard to work with different females. My experience is that they have always, kind of took me under their wing and helped me out at work. But I also think girls in science, because we know we're outnumbered, we stick together more. So my mentors have been people I worked with as well. But probably all of us are alike too, in the fact that now we know what we went through, so we reach out to organizations like this. So it's awesome to see that this is available to help younger kids growing up, whereas definitely I want to be a mentor to more people, and I don't want any of the young adults here or children to think it's anything wrong with asking now, because you have a lot of options out there. So take advantage of, when you're in a professional setting like this and you meet someone, to ask to tour their facility or ask to come and see them at work one day to, just see what the job really involves. So that's my experience with
So were
mentors.
your parents mentors to you? Did
Oh, yes.
They gave you advice whether you wanted it or not?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
Male and female.